Hey, welcome back to the channel. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
My father's 30-year career celebration was supposed to be about loyalty, service, and sacrifice. That's what the banner said anyway. Honoring Colonel Raymond Carter. Gold letters, polished podium, expensive catering that my mother insisted was necessary for appearances. The event was held at the Officers Club on base, the kind of place with framed photos of past commanders and a bar that serves bourbon older than most lieutenants. I stood near the back of the room in uniform, holding a plain white envelope that had arrived that morning. My deployment orders. The room smelled like cologne steak and quiet competition. My older sister Cynthia was in the center of it all, laughing too loudly at jokes from men with stars on their shoulders. She wore her captain's bars like they were a crown. Cynthia worked in administration, desk job, policy memos, strategic briefings. She liked to say she shaped the battlefield without ever stepping on one. I never corrected her. My father stood at the podium retelling stories about supply chains during overseas operations, how he kept divisions running when everything else fell apart. He was proud of logistics. He believed wars were won by spreadsheets and discipline. He also believed Cynthia was his legacy. I was the quiet one, the extra child. Cynthia spotted the envelope in my hand before anyone else did. "What's that?" she asked already, smiling like she'd found something amusing. "Orders," I said. She reached for it without waiting for permission. That's how it had always been. Cynthia never asked. She took. She slid the paper out, scanned the header, and then laughed. Not a polite laugh. A sharp public, make sure everyone hears it laugh. "Oh my God," she said, raising the paper slightly. "They're sending you to Grey Ridge." A few officers nearby turned their heads. "That's basically a storage base," she continued. "You'll be counting ammo crates in the middle of nowhere." The room got quiet in that subtle military way. Conversations didn't stop. They just lowered in volume. "It's a deployment," I said evenly. She waved the paper. "It's exile. Meanwhile, I'm up for promotion next quarter." She looked toward one of the generals standing near the bar. "Some of us are actually moving forward." My mother, Patricia, stepped closer. She had that tight smile she used when she smelled weakness. "Well," she said, touching Cynthia's arm, "not everyone is cut out for leadership." My father cleared his throat but didn't interrupt. Cynthia kept going. "You know what this is, right? They don't trust you with anything real, so they send you somewhere quiet. Somewhere harmless." She turned to the room. "My sister, ladies and gentlemen, future queen of inventory management." A couple of forced chuckles followed. No one wanted to be rude. No one wanted to disagree either. I felt every eye in that room land on me. My father finally spoke. "Elena, you should be grateful you're still in. Not everyone thrives in this environment." Thrives. That word again. Cynthia folded the orders neatly and tapped them against my chest. "Maybe you should focus on supporting the family brand instead of embarrassing it." There it was, embarrassing it. My mother didn't hesitate. "Your grandfather built a name in aviation. Your father built a reputation in logistics. Cynthia is building influence. And you?" She looked me up and down. "You disappear." She meant it as an insult. I didn't correct her. My grandfather had been a pilot, a real one, combat missions. The kind of record that doesn't get discussed at dinner because it makes people uncomfortable. He left me one thing before he passed, a worn silver ring he used to wear on base. I rubbed it with my thumb as Cynthia kept talking. "You know what they call Grey Ridge," she said. "Retirement practice." A few more laughs, louder now. My father stepped away from the podium and faced me directly. "You need to accept reality, Elena. Not everyone is meant to shine. Some people are meant to support those who do." He didn't lower his voice. "Cynthia is going places. You should be helping her, not chasing fantasies." I could feel the weight of 30 years of his expectations pressing down on me. "I'm not chasing anything," I said calmly. Cynthia leaned closer. "Then what are you doing?" I looked at her. Then at my parents. Then at the officers watching quietly. "This is the position I earned," I said. "No drama, no raised voice, just that." Cynthia smirked. "Earned, please. If that's earning, I'd hate to see failure." My mother nodded. "Sometimes we have to admit when one child simply doesn't measure up." There it was again. Public, clean, final, failure. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain anything about the unit code printed on that page, or the signatures at the bottom, or the fact that Grey Ridge wasn't exactly what it sounded like. I just slipped the orders back into the envelope. Across the room, one of the younger lieutenants looked at me with something close to sympathy. I almost laughed. Sympathy from someone who thought the worst thing in the world was missing a promotion board. Cynthia raised her glass. To real success, she said. Glasses clinked. I took a slow breath. My father put a hand on Cynthia's shoulder. You are the future of this family, he said loudly enough for others to hear. And just like that, I was officially the disappointment. Standing in a room decorated to celebrate service, I was being told I didn't belong in the story. I could have said a lot of things. I could have mentioned that not all work is visible, that not all assignments are public, that sometimes the most important roles come with the least explanation, but I didn't. Instead, I gave Cynthia the smallest smile. You're right about one thing, I said. She lifted an eyebrow. Oh, I do disappear. The room went quiet again. Cynthia rolled her eyes. Drama doesn't suit you. Neither does arrogance, I replied lightly. A few heads turned at that. She stepped closer. You think this is funny, no, I said. I think it's predictable. My mother inhaled sharply. My father's jaw tightened. Watch your tone. I held his gaze. I am. Silence settled over us like a held breath. Cynthia leaned in one last time and whispered loud enough for the nearby officers to hear. Enjoy counting boxes. Then she pulled away, smiling for the crowd. I looked around the room. At the polished metals, at the expensive suits, at the people who believed they understood power because they had proximity to it. They thought this was humiliation. They thought this was my ceiling. They thought Grey Ridge was a punishment. I pressed my thumb harder against my grandfather's ring and let their words hang in the air without fighting them. Because sometimes the loudest person in the room is the least informed. And sometimes being underestimated is the safest position you can have. Tell me something. Have you ever been the quiet one in the room while everyone else decided your worth for you only to realize later they had no idea who they were talking to? Let me know in the comments. I checked my account that night, not because I was worried, because I like clean numbers before a deployment. No loose ends, no surprises. The balance didn't make sense. I refreshed the screen. Still wrong. 5 years of special duty pay. Hazard bonuses. Flight incentive pay. Every extra dollar I didn't spend. Gone. The transaction history was short and brutal. Large transfers. Same week. Cleared. I didn't panic. I took screenshots. Then I drove home. My parents' house was lit up even though the party had ended hours ago. Cynthia's new car sat in the driveway. Black Mercedes, fresh plates, temporary tags still taped inside the rear window. Image apparently had a price. I walked in without knocking. Cynthia was at the kitchen island scrolling through her phone. My mother stood at the counter pouring wine. My father sat at the head of the table like he was presiding over something important. They all looked up. You're still here? Cynthia asked. I placed my phone on the table and turned it toward them. Why is my savings account empty? No one pretended to misunderstand. My mother sighed first. Not guilt, annoyance. Lower your voice, she said. We're not criminals, that depends, I replied. Cynthia leaned back in her chair. Relax, it's not like you were using it. That wasn't the question. My father folded his hands. We made a family decision. I let that sit. A family decision, I repeated. Yes, my mother said. Cynthia had some short-term financial strain. Credit cards, networking events, professional obligations. Professional obligations, Cynthia added. You wouldn't understand. I looked at the car keys on the counter. You drained 5 years of my pay for a car. It's not just a car, Cynthia snapped. It's positioning. For what? For advancement, she said. People notice presentation. I stared at her. You stole from me to improve your presentation. My mother stepped in quickly. Don't use that word. What word? Stole. Then what should I call it? My father's tone hardened. We had access. Your mother's name was still linked from when you opened the account. That was true. I opened it at 19. I never bothered changing the authorization. My mistake. We assumed, my mother said carefully, that you would want to contribute to your sister's future. Contribute. I almost smiled. You assumed wrong. Cynthia stood up now. Oh, please, you've never been the ambitious one. You disappear for months. You don't network. You don't build alliances. You don't represent this family. I serve, I said. She laughed softly. You hide. My father leaned forward. This isn't about feelings. It's about return on investment. There it was. Investment. You're our daughter, my mother said. But we have to be realistic. Cynthia has trajectory, she has influence. You have unpredictability. Unpredictability, I asked. You don't play the game, Cynthia said. You don't cultivate sponsors. You don't attend the right dinners. I looked at her car keys again. So I fund your dinners. My father tapped the table once. Enough sarcasm. I faced him. You took my deployment savings. We redirected family resources. That money was earned. And it's still serving the family, my mother replied. No, I said calmly. It's serving her ego. Silence. Cynthia's expression shifted from smug to irritated. You act like you were going to buy something meaningful with it. I was. What, she challenged. Security. That word didn't land the way I intended. My father stood slowly. If you're so concerned about assets, let's talk about the real one. I already knew what he meant. The ranch, he said. My grandfather's property, hundreds of acres. Paid off. Valued in the millions now. You are still listed as a partial beneficiary. My father continued. But that can change. My mother crossed her arms. Your grandfather believed in legacy. Cynthia represents continuity. Say it, I said quietly. My father didn't hesitate. If you can't support this family's direction, your name comes off the will. Straight, clean, no emotion. And what exactly does support look like, I asked. Cynthia walked over to a folder on the counter and slid it toward me. Power of attorney, she said. For the ranch. Management rights. Temporary, of course. Temporary, I flipped through it quickly. It wasn't temporary. You want control, I said. For efficiency, she corrected. For leverage, I replied. My mother's patience snapped. Stop acting like a victim. You've never carried the weight Cynthia has. She's the one in rooms that matter, and I'm the one funding them. You're funding progress, my father said. Or you can fund your independence. Without the ranch. There it was, the choice. Sign and stay connected to family wealth. Or refuse and walk away from inheritance. You'd cut me out, I asked. If necessary. No hesitation. Cynthia softened her voice the way she did when she wanted something signed quickly. Look, Elena, you're deploying again. You won't even be around to manage anything. Let me handle it. I know how to grow assets. With my money, I asked. With family assets, she corrected again. The room felt smaller than it had at the party. 5 years of savings. Gone. My future security used as branding. And now the ranch. I closed the folder. You really see me as a bad investment, I said. My mother didn't deny it. We see patterns, and I don't fit. Cynthia shrugged. You never tried to. I picked up the pen resting on the folder. All three of them watched. My father's face was calm. Cynthia's was confident. My mother's was calculating. They thought pressure worked on me. They thought I feared losing something tied to their approval. I placed the pen back down. No. One word. My father's expression shifted slightly. Not shock. Irritation. You're being emotional. No, I said. I'm being clear. Cynthia's voice hardened. You'll regret that. Maybe, I said. But at least it'll be my regret. My mother shook her head. You're throwing away generational wealth. For what, I asked. Control for pride, she replied. I picked up my phone from the table. You already took what I earned, I said. You don't get what he left. My father's tone dropped lower. You walk out without signing and don't expect the will to stay unchanged. I never expected anything, I answered. Cynthia crossed her arms. You think you're above all this? No, I said. I think I'm done funding it. Silence stretched across the kitchen. My father sat back down slowly. Then you've chosen your position. I did that a long time ago. I turned toward the door. Behind me, Cynthia's voice followed sharp and certain. Enjoy your little remote base. I didn't look back. Because the numbers in my account were gone. But something else had just become very clear. They didn't see a daughter. They saw an asset that failed to appreciate fast enough. And they had just forced me to recalculate everything. I packed my gear the next morning without rushing. 2 uniforms pressed, flight boots polished, documents sorted into separate folders. I moved clean before deployments. I like systems. My phone buzzed around noon. Unknown number. I answered anyway. Tell me you didn't punch your sister, a familiar voice said. I leaned against the kitchen counter of my apartment. Good afternoon to you too, Marcus. Staff Sergeant Marcus Hill, military police. We met years ago during a joint operation overseas. He had a talent for noticing things other people missed. You got enemies in high places now, he asked. I've always had one. He didn't laugh. There's a packet floating around, he said. Flag to your gaining command. What kind of packet? Behavioral concerns, stress, instability, questionable decision-making under pressure. I didn't react. Who signed it? I asked. He hesitated. It's routed through someone in admin with connections, not directly signed by your sister, but the forwarding chain, it's her circle. Of course it was. They're recommending a psych evaluation before you're cleared for operational access. Marcus continued. If that sticks, you don't just get delayed. You get sidelined or discharged. I looked at the deployment orders sitting on my table. When was it sent? I asked. 48 hours ago, the same day my savings disappeared. Forward me what you can, I said. I can't send classified material. I don't need classified. I need timestamps. There was a pause. You're calm, Marcus said. I'm busy. You want me to open something formal? Not yet. Silence again. Elena. He added quieter now. This isn't random. I know. After we hung up, I sat down and opened my laptop. If Cynthia wanted to question my mental stability, she picked the wrong week. I accessed my personnel file through the secure portal. Everything looked clean on my end. No flags yet. That meant the review hadn't processed. Good. I pulled up bank records next. Transfers from my savings had been moved into a joint account my mother co-managed. From there, part of it went toward a dealership payment. The rest split across 3 credit card balances. I didn't need emotions. I needed patterns. Then I checked something else. Cynthia's recent reimbursements. Administrative officers have access to discretionary operational funds. They're not huge, but they exist. Travel allowances, event coordination budgets, official representation expenses. I knew how the system worked. I also knew how people abused it. Her reimbursements over the past year were high, not criminal on the surface, but frequent. Hotel upgrades, strategic networking dinners, vehicle maintenance reimbursements that didn't match her old car's service records. I took screenshots, saved copies, labeled folders. If she wanted to question my fitness for duty, I'd quietly examine hers. 3 hours later, Marcus texted. They pushed it fast. You're flagged for preliminary review on arrival. So that was the play. Delay my clearance, question my judgment, keep me grounded long enough to damage my record. Cynthia didn't want me gone. She wanted me neutralized. I stood up and paced once across the room. Not from panic, from calculation. If I reacted publicly, I'd look defensive. If I accused her without proof, I'd look unstable. So I did what I've always done. I disappeared. That evening, I drove to a small office off base, where an old acquaintance worked in internal auditing. Civilian contractor, sharp, discreet. I need general guidance, I told him, on reimbursement irregularities. Hypothetically. He didn't smile. Hypothetically, are we talking sloppy or deliberate patterns that suggest lifestyle inflation? He leaned back. If it's deliberate, it leaves trails. Always. That's what I thought. He didn't ask for names. I didn't give any. Back in my apartment, I printed out Cynthia's publicly available expense summaries. Nothing illegal yet. Just aggressive. Aggressive gets comfortable. Comfortable gets careless. The next day, Marcus called again. There's something else, he said. The forwarding memo references, family observed instability. I almost laughed. They interviewed them, I asked. Looks like informal statements, not official sworn affidavits. My parents. They didn't just take my money, they vouched for my instability. Did they cite incidents, I asked? Generalized claims, withdrawal, secrecy, emotional detachment. I leaned against my desk. Secrecy, that part was accurate, just not in the way they meant. Marcus, I said, if someone were to fabricate medical concern narratives for career sabotage, what's the exposure? Career ending, he replied. If proven. That word mattered. If. I'll handle it, I said. You sure? Yes. After we hung up, I opened my secure device. There are calls you make only when necessary. Short, clean, no detail. I dialed a number stored under a simple label. The line picked up on the second ring. Status, a voice said. Eagle is ready to launch, I replied. A pause. Confirmed, confirmed. Timeline on schedule. Understood. The call ended. No names, no context, just alignment. I shut the device off and sat in silence for a moment. Cynthia believed she was the strategist in the family. She thought influence meant control. She thought paperwork could clip my wings before I ever left the ground. What she didn't understand was that my career had never depended on her circle, or her approval, or my parents' statements. I began drafting a formal response packet of my own. Calm, documented, professional, not accusing, just clarifying. I attached performance evaluations, mission commendations, fitness scores, peer reviews, every clean record from the last 5 years. Then I added something else, a timeline, bank withdrawal dates, forwarded memo timestamps, vehicle purchase receipt, reimbursement spikes. Not conclusions, just alignment. If anyone looked closely, the pattern would form itself. I sealed the folder and placed it in my deployment case. I didn't feel anger. Anger wastes energy. I felt focus. They wanted me evaluated fine. They wanted to question my judgment. Let them. But once this moved past whispers and into review, it wouldn't just be my file on the table. It would be hers too. And Cynthia had built her reputation on visibility. I built mine on results. As I zipped my bag shut, my phone buzzed one last time. Marcus again. "Hey," he said, "you still there?" "Yeah." "You sure you don't want me to get ahead of this?" "No," I answered. "Let it run," he exhaled slowly. "You're playing a long game. I'm playing the correct one." I ended the call and turned off the lights in my apartment. If Cynthia wanted a fight, she'd expect noise. What she was getting instead was silence. And silence, when used properly, is leverage. I showed up in full uniform with my deployment bag already loaded in the trunk. The timing wasn't an accident. Cynthia's promotion ceremony and my departure fell on the same afternoon. My parents called it efficient planning. I called it theater. The officers' club looked even more polished than it had a few nights earlier. New floral arrangements, updated seating chart, a printed program with Cynthia's name in bold under promotion to major, no mention of me. A small table near the entrance held a framed photo of my grandfather in his flight suit. That part was new. My mother liked to display legacy when it served her narrative. Cynthia stood near the front laughing with 2 colonels and a general I recognized from regional command. Her new Mercedes key fob was visible on the table beside her purse, positioned like a trophy. She spotted me walking in and raised her eyebrows. "Wow," she said loudly enough for the circle around her to hear. "You made it," I said I would. She looked me up and down, still enlisted mindset. "I'm commissioned," I replied evenly. She waved her hand. "Same energy," one of the colonels chuckled politely. "This is my sister," Cynthia announced. "She's being deployed to Grey Ridge." The general nodded once. "Storage command." "Basically," Cynthia said. "Inventory oversight. Important if you like counting." Light laughter followed. I didn't correct them. My father approached with 2 glasses of sparkling water and handed one to Cynthia. "Not me." "Elena," he said. Not smiling. "We're glad you came." "I'm leaving from here," I said. "Yes," my mother added as she stepped in. "Before that, we have a small family matter." "Of course we did." She guided me toward a side table near the back where a folder sat waiting. "We thought it would be symbolic," she said. "Before you go off again, symbolic never means harmless." I opened the folder. Quitclaim deed. The house my grandfather built before he ever bought the ranch. The small property in town. Paid off. Sentimental. Valuable. "You're giving that to Cynthia," I said. "We're consolidating assets," my father replied. In front of guests, I asked. "It shows unity," my mother said. Cynthia joined us, smiling for nearby observers. "It's just paperwork. You won't be around anyway." I looked at the room. Officers watching discreetly, some pretending not to. "You want me to sign away property during your promotion party?" I said. "Don't make it dramatic," Cynthia replied. "I'm not," she leaned closer. "Sign it. It makes everyone comfortable." Comfortable. I closed the folder without signing. "Not today," I said. Her smile tightened. "You don't want to cause a scene. I'm not causing anything." She turned to the small group nearby and laughed lightly. "She gets sentimental." Then she looked back at me and lowered her voice. "Don't embarrass us." Before I could answer, the ceremony began. Cynthia stood at attention while the general pinned her new rank. Applause filled the room. Cameras flashed. My mother wiped away tears like she was watching history. When it was Cynthia's turn to speak, she didn't waste the moment. "I want to thank my family," she began. "Especially my parents, who understood that excellence requires sacrifice." She paused and glanced in my direction. "Not everyone is meant to lead," she added casually, "but everyone can support leadership." Some people clapped harder than others. Then she did something unnecessary. And I want to acknowledge my sister, she continued. She's also serving, in her own way. A few heads turned. She's heading out to a small support base, Cynthia said, smiling thinly. Every organization needs people willing to handle the background work. There it was, clear, public, calculated. I held her gaze. She tilted her head slightly. We all find our level. The room went quiet for a beat too long. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket but ignored it. After the ceremony, my mother steered me toward a side table near the catering station. Since you're leaving, she said, can you help clear some glasses? Staff is short. Of course they were. So I stood there in uniform, wiping condensation rings off cocktail tables, while guests congratulated Cynthia for breaking barriers. An older major looked at me curiously. You're the sister, yes sir, heading to Grey Ridge, yes sir. He nodded. Quiet place, that's the idea. Across the room, Cynthia was shaking hands like she'd just secured peace in a war. My phone vibrated again. This time, I stepped away to check it. Base-wide alert. Mandatory assembly. Large-scale joint exercise activation. Immediate coordination required. Highest readiness posture in a decade. I read it twice. Cynthia's phone buzzed almost immediately, then my father's, then several officers. The room shifted tone in seconds. The general excused himself first. Conversations turned serious. Laughter stopped. Cynthia scanned her screen and straightened. This is big, she said. This is exactly what we've been preparing for. She moved quickly toward the general. Sir, I can assist with coordination. I've been reviewing logistics forecasts for weeks. He nodded distractedly but didn't commit. My father looked at her proudly. This is your moment. She believed it. I walked back to the catering table and picked up another glass. A lieutenant rushed past me toward the exit. The energy in the room was no longer celebratory. It was operational. Cynthia returned from speaking with the general confidence radiating off her. They're going to need someone steady, she said to my mother. Someone with strategic awareness. She glanced at me briefly. Not crate counters. I didn't respond. My phone vibrated one more time. Different tone, encrypted line. I stepped outside onto the balcony, overlooking the lawn, and answered. Status, the voice said. In position, I replied. Proceed to standby. Movement imminent. Understood. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Inside, Cynthia was already discussing coordination frameworks with two officers who were politely half listening. She saw me re-enter and smirked. Try not to miss your ride, she said. I won't, I answered. My father approached again, holding the unsigned folder. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No, I said calmly. You are. The alert tone sounded again through the building speakers. All operational personnel report immediately. Cynthia lifted her chin, ready to step forward. I placed the glass down on the table, because sometimes the loudest person in the room thinks the call is for them. And sometimes it isn't. I stayed where I was near the service table while the room shifted from celebration to command mode. Officers checked phones. Conversations turned clipped and technical. The band had already packed up. Even the catering staff moved faster, sensing the change in air. Then the front doors opened. Not dramatically, not kicked in, just opened with purpose. 3 pilots walked in wearing flight suits marked with squadron patches. Most people in that room didn't recognize. Dust still clung to their boots, helmets tucked under their arms, no medals on display, no introductions needed. But everyone knew what they flew. F-22. You don't mistake that kind of pilot. The posture alone gives it away. The general near the podium stopped mid-sentence. Every officer in uniform instinctively straightened. Even my father stood up. The room went silent in that clean military way that doesn't require instruction. Cynthia turned first. I watched the calculation cross her face. Surprise. Then opportunity. She smoothed her jacket and stepped forward with the confidence of someone who believed everything entering that room was meant for her. Gentlemen, she said brightly, extending her hand. Welcome. You're just in time. The lead pilot didn't slow down, not even a glance. Cynthia's hand remained extended for a full second before she awkwardly lowered it. It's Major Carter, she added quickly, recently promoted. Still nothing. The 3 pilots walked past her like she was a coat rack. You could hear heels clicking as she pivoted to follow them. Are you here regarding the exercise activation? She asked, trying to catch up. I've been coordinating logistics frameworks. They kept moving across the room, through clusters of officers who stepped aside automatically, past my father who looked confused for the first time that night, past my mother whose smile had faded, straight toward the back, toward the service table, toward me. I was still holding a tray with 2 empty glasses on it. One of the catering staff had just handed them to me a moment earlier. The 3 pilots stopped exactly 3 feet in front of me, close enough that I could see the dust lines around their collar seams, close enough that the entire room could see the distance between us. Cynthia slowed behind them. "Is there a misunderstanding?" she asked, voice tight but controlled. The lead pilot ignored her. He looked directly at me, no smile, no performance, just recognition. For a brief second, the room held its breath. Then all 3 pilots came to attention, sharp, precise, and saluted, not casually, not socially. Full military salute. In front of generals, in front of my family, in front of every officer who had laughed 10 minutes earlier. The general near the podium instinctively returned the salute, confused, but compelled by protocol. Cynthia's mouth opened slightly. My father looked from them to me like he was trying to solve a math problem that didn't add up. The lead pilot spoke. "Ma'am, 1 word, clear, controlled." Cynthia stepped forward quickly. There must be some confusion. She's support staff for a remote assignment. No one acknowledged her. The second pilot adjusted his helmet under his arm. "Ma'am," he repeated, addressing me, "we are ready for briefing." I set the tray down slowly on the table beside me. The glasses made a soft click against the wood. My mother finally found her voice. "Elena," she said, uncertain. Cynthia forced a laugh. "Okay, seriously, what is this?" The lead pilot's eyes never left mine. "We have transport waiting," he said. Transport. The word carried across the silent room. Cynthia stepped directly into my line of sight. "Explain," she demanded quietly. I didn't answer her. I looked at the pilots instead. "You're early," I said. "Yes, ma'am," the lead replied. Airspace window moved forward. A few officers in the room exchanged looks. Airspace windows don't move for crate counters. Cynthia shook her head. "This is ridiculous." She turned to the general. "Sir, I believe there's been a protocol error." The general didn't respond immediately. He was studying the patches on their suits now. Recognition was settling in. The third pilot spoke for the first time. "Ma'am," he said to me, "the team is assembled." "The team." My father took a step closer. "Elena," he said slowly. "What team?" I picked up my deployment envelope from the table beside me, the same one Cynthia had laughed at days earlier. I handed it to the lead pilot. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. Cynthia's voice sharpened. "You're embarrassing yourself." The irony almost made me smile. "I thought I was counting boxes," I said calmly. The silence deepened. One of the colonels whispered something under his breath. The general finally stepped forward. "Captain," he addressed the lead pilot. "Clarify your purpose." The pilot shifted his stance slightly but did not break bearing. "Sir, we are under direct orders from Special Operations Command to report to our commanding officer." He paused. "In person." The words landed heavier than the salute. My mother's face drained of color. Cynthia laughed again, but it sounded forced now. "This is absurd. She doesn't command fighter pilots." The lead pilot turned his head just enough to acknowledge the sound of her voice. Then he looked back at me. "Awaiting instruction, ma'am." Every eye in the room returned to me. I could feel it physically. Attention shifting. Assumptions collapsing. Cynthia stepped closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "If this is some kind of stunt, it's not," I replied quietly. My father swallowed. "Elena, what is happening?" I adjusted the cuff of my sleeve. "You wanted unity," I said to him. "This is it." The front doors opened again. A base operations sergeant rushed in, scanning the room until he locked onto the 3 pilots. He stopped when he saw me. Then he came to attention too. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "airfield is secured." Behind me, Cynthia took a slow step back. The room no longer felt like hers. No one was laughing now. No one was clinking glasses. The tray I had been holding sat untouched on the table. And for the first time that night, no one was asking me to clear anything. I stepped forward, and the 3 pilots adjusted with me like it was muscle memory. The room still hadn't exhaled. The general's eyes were locked on the lead pilot now. He wasn't confused anymore. He was recalculating. The lead pilot turned slightly toward the podium where the microphone was still live from Cynthia's speech. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. His voice carried low but precise. "Commander," he said, Not loud, just enough. The microphone picked it up and pushed it across the entire hall. Ghost formation is assembled. The F-22s are holding for your launch authorization. You could hear the air leave the room. Cynthia actually laughed once, a short, sharp sound. This is insane, she said. There has to be a mix-up. She works logistics. No one joined her. The second pilot stepped half a pace forward and came to full attention again. The third mirrored him. The movement was synchronized and deliberate. Every officer in that room knew what that level of formality meant. My father's voice came out rough. Elena, I met his eyes for a second, then looked back at the pilots. At ease, I said. They didn't relax casually. They shifted to controlled readiness. The general walked closer now, studying my insignia, then my face. Clarify, he said to the lead pilot. The pilot didn't hesitate. Sir Captain Elena Carter is operational call sign Ghost. She is mission commander for this task group under Special Operations Directive Authority. The words were clean, no drama, just fact. Cynthia's voice rose. No, that's not possible. She's never even... The lead pilot turned toward her slowly. Ma'am, he said evenly with respect. You don't have access to her record. Silence. My mother grabbed the edge of a nearby table like she needed support. My father's expression shifted from confusion to something closer to disbelief. 50 sorties, the second pilot added calmly. All classified, all successful. The microphone carried every word. Under direct Special Operations Command oversight, the third finished. The room had gone beyond quiet. It was still. Cynthia shook her head. She would have said something. I almost smiled at that. The lead pilot looked directly at my parents. Logistics, he repeated. His eyes were sharp now. Your daughter is the only pilot in this wing who has completed 50 black-level missions without a loss. That landed harder than anything else. My father opened his mouth but didn't form a sentence. My mother whispered, That's not... She would have operational security, the pilot replied. Not optional, Cynthia stepped closer to me, her voice breaking into something raw. You lied. I didn't, I said. You let us think I let you talk. That hurt her more than yelling would have. The general straightened fully now. Captain Carter, he said carefully, choosing each word. Are you confirming command status? Yes, sir. The formality mattered. His posture shifted instantly. Understood, that was it. No applause, no dramatic music, just acknowledgement. The officers who had laughed earlier were now studying the floor. The colonel who joked about storage command looked like he wanted to disappear. Cynthia's breathing grew uneven. This is a stunt, she insisted weakly. This is to humiliate me. I finally turned to her fully. You did that yourself. Her eyes searched my face for hesitation, for apology, for weakness. There was none. My father stepped forward slowly. All those deployments, he said. You said they were routine. They were not routine, I replied. Why didn't you tell us, my mother asked. Because you never asked the right questions. The lead pilot checked his watch subtly. Ma'am, he said to me, window is closing. I nodded once. The general looked between us. This exercise is not an exercise, I said calmly. Another ripple moved through the room. Cynthia's voice dropped to a whisper. You're doing this to destroy me. No, I said. I'm doing my job. The third pilot stepped slightly closer to the microphone again. For clarity, he said, tone professional. Captain Carter operates under authority that supersedes local administrative review. That sentence wasn't accidental. My father understood it immediately. The psych review, he said quietly. I didn't answer him. Cynthia's face changed. For the first time, I saw fear. Real fear. You knew, she asked. I always know. The lead pilot's gaze sharpened. Any interference with command readiness, he said, will be addressed formally. He didn't look at Cynthia when he said it. He didn't have to. My mother began shaking her head slowly as if rejecting reality could reverse it. You're just her sister, she whispered. I held her gaze. I am. The room that had celebrated Cynthia's rise was now witnessing something else entirely. Not my success, her miscalculation. The general stepped back and saluted me properly this time. Clean, clear, public. Protocol demanded it. I returned it. Cynthia stared at the exchange like it physically hurt. The lead pilot's voice cut through the silence one last time. Ghost formation ready, ma'am. I picked up my deployment envelope from the table and slid it into my bag. My father finally found his voice again. Elena, he said softer now we didn't know. That's correct. Cynthia took a step backward. No, she whispered. No, this isn't, but it was. And everyone in that room knew it now, because the loudest myth in the room had just collapsed under the weight of classified truth. And for the first time in her life, Cynthia wasn't the center of the story. She was the mistake in it. The front doors opened again. This time, no one mistook the purpose. 2 military police officers entered first, followed by a third carrying a slim black case. Their uniforms were crisp, faces neutral, no rush, no hesitation. The room shifted from shock to dread. Cynthia turned, relief flashing across her face for half a second. Oh good, she said quickly. Finally, someone can clear this up. The lead MP didn't look at her. He walked directly toward the general, saluted, and handed over a folder. Sir, authorization to execute. The general skimmed the first page, then looked at me briefly before nodding once. Proceed. That word echoed into the room louder than any speech Cynthia had given that night. The second MP stepped forward. Major Cynthia Carter, he said. Clearly you are being detained pending formal investigation under Article 121 and Article 107. Even officers who weren't legal experts knew those numbers. Larceny, false official statements. Cynthia blinked. I'm sorry, she said, forcing a laugh. There has to be a mistake. The MP continued without reacting. You are suspected of unauthorized use of government funds, fraudulent reimbursement claims, and submission of falsified documentation regarding the mental fitness of Captain Elena Carter. The microphone on the podium carried every word across the hall. My mother gasped. My father didn't move. This is ridiculous, Cynthia snapped. This is retaliation. The third MP opened the black case and pulled out a small projector unit. Within seconds, the large screen behind the podium flickered to life. Her promotion slide disappeared. In its place, transaction records. Clean, organized, time-stamped. Government reimbursement forms. Vehicle purchase confirmation. Transfer amounts. Matching dates. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The lead MP addressed the room professionally. For transparency, he said these findings are part of an ongoing audit initiated 3 months ago. 3 months. Before my savings disappeared. Before the psych report was forwarded. Before the Mercedes. Cynthia looked at the screen, then at my father. Dad, say something, she demanded. He stared at the projected documents like they were written in another language. The next slide appeared. Email metadata. Routing chain for the forwarded behavioral concern memo. Digital signature logs. Timestamp alignment with internal system access. The MP didn't embellish. Evidence indicates deliberate manipulation of personnel records to initiate a command-level review. Cynthia's breathing became uneven. That's not proof, she said. Anyone can forward concerns. The screen shifted again. Handwriting analysis overlay. Signature comparison. Her pen strokes against mine. Forgery. Clear. Precise. Scientific. The murmurs in the room grew louder. The colonel who laughed earlier now looked physically uncomfortable. This is insane, Cynthia said, voice cracking. You can't just walk into my promotion ceremony and— This is no longer your ceremony, the MP interrupted calmly. That landed harder than the charges. My mother stepped forward, trembling. There has to be some misunderstanding, she pleaded. We are a military family. The MP didn't soften. Ma'am, we are aware. The projector advanced again. Luxury dining reimbursements coded as strategic operational engagement. Spa charges labeled as confidential transport expense. Even the Mercedes down payment traced through layered transfers. It wasn't dramatic. It was clinical. Numbers don't shout. They expose. Cynthia looked at me finally. You did this, she said quietly. No, I answered. You did. I was protecting this family. By draining it. She shook her head violently. You are unstable. You disappear. You lie. I follow orders. The lead MP stepped forward again. Major Carter, please place your hands behind your back. The words felt heavy in the air. Cynthia didn't move. You can't arrest me here, she said, in front of everyone. The MP's expression didn't change. We can. 2 officers stepped closer. My father finally spoke. Cynthia, he said hoarsely, comply. The room that once applauded her promotion now watched in complete silence. She looked around desperately, at the general, at the colonels, at the guests who had praised her ambition. No one stepped in, because this wasn't politics anymore. This was evidence. I built this, she whispered almost to herself. I worked for this. You misused it, the MP replied. They secured her wrists with regulation cuffs. Not aggressively, not gently, just procedure. Her makeup had begun to run slightly at the corners of her eyes. Not from regret, from fear. I'm your daughter, she cried suddenly to my parents. My mother broke down completely, covering her mouth. My father stood rigid, eyes locked forward. Face drained of authority. The projector displayed one final slide. Assignment confirmation. Grey Ridge wasn't a storage base. It was an oversight division attached to high-level military inspection command, the unit responsible for auditing misuse of operational funds. The same unit that had been tracking Cynthia's pattern for months. I felt several pairs of eyes turn toward me again. Not with ridicule this time, with understanding. Cynthia looked at the screen, then at me. You knew, she whispered. I was assigned. The distinction mattered. The MP began guiding her toward the exit. She resisted once, just enough to break the smooth rhythm of the moment. You're ruining us, she screamed at me. No, I said calmly. I'm finishing what you started. Her heels scraped slightly against the polished floor as she was escorted out. The doors closed behind her with a quiet click. No applause, no cheers, just the low hum of air conditioning and the faint echo of everything she had built, unraveling in under 10 minutes. My father finally lowered himself into a chair, 30 years of reputation sitting heavy on his shoulders. My mother's mascara streaked down her face. Around us, officers avoided eye contact. The screen behind the podium went dark. Cynthia's name was no longer projected anywhere. And just like that, the era built on influence shortcuts and borrowed credibility was over. Not with drama, not with revenge, with documentation. The doors had barely stopped vibrating from Cynthia's exit when my mother dropped to her knees. Not slowly, not gracefully, she just collapsed. Elena, she sobbed, reaching for me. Please, fix this. My father didn't kneel, but he stepped closer than he had all night. The authority was gone from his posture. He looked smaller somehow. You have influence, he said carefully. You can talk to someone. This doesn't have to go this far. I didn't move. Officers were still in the room. No one pretended not to watch anymore. This already went far, I said. My mother shook her head. We made mistakes. Families make mistakes. You emptied my account, I replied evenly. You signed statements about my mental health. We were protecting your image. My father's jaw tightened. You're her sister, and she forged my signature. Silence. The word forged carries weight in uniform spaces. My mother crawled closer. We'll return the money, every dollar. It's already evidence, I said. We didn't know it was illegal, she insisted. That's not how that works. My father ran a hand over his face. Look, he said, voice low, trying to regain control of something. Cynthia panicked. She felt threatened. By what? He didn't answer. By me doing my job, I asked. He looked away. My mother's voice broke again. Family is everything, Elena. I studied her. I've heard that sentence before, usually right before someone justifies damage. Family doesn't celebrate when one of their own is listed as presumed dead, I said calmly. That stopped her crying for a second. My father looked up sharply. That was a paperwork delay, he said. You held a dinner, I replied. You told people I was reckless. His silence confirmed it. I reached into my deployment bag and pulled out a slim legal folder. Not dramatic, just prepared. My mother stared at it like it was a weapon. What is that? She whispered. Clarity, I said. I opened it and placed the first document on the table, formal notice of revocation. My parents had been listed as emergency military contacts with secondary access privileges during deployments. Not uncommon, but not required. I'm removing your authorization, I said. My father's head snapped up. You can't, just I can. The form was already partially completed. You will no longer have access to any support disbursements, casualty notifications, or dependent-based resource privileges connected to my service. My mother's voice trembled. You're cutting us off. I'm separating liability. This is revenge, my father said. No, I replied. This is procedure. I signed the form. Clean, precise. The pen didn't shake. The second document came out next. Transfer of beneficiary interest. My grandfather's ranch. My father stared at the heading. You wouldn't, he said quietly. I would. My mother reached for my hand, but I stepped back slightly. You're emotional, she pleaded. I'm consistent. The document outlined the formation of a veterans trust. Structured, legally binding, already drafted weeks ago. The ranch would no longer belong to either of us. It would fund rehabilitation programs for wounded service members, housing support, medical travel, long-term care, completely outside family control. "You're giving it away?" my father asked. "I'm redirecting it. That was your inheritance." "No," I said, "it was his." And my grandfather had believed in service, not leverage. My mother's crying turned sharp. "We raised you, yes, and this is how you repay us." "I'm not repaying you," I said. "I'm closing accounts." The officers in the room remained silent. No one intervened. No one defended my parents, because the numbers had already spoken. The forged signature slide still lingered in everyone's memory. My father straightened slightly, trying to reclaim some authority. "You're destroying this family." "No," I replied calmly. "You did that when you treated me like a liability." My mother whispered, "We were afraid." "Of what?" "That you'd outgrow us." I held her gaze. "That's not fear," I said. "That's control." I signed the second document, 2 signatures, 2 witnesses required. The general, still standing near the podium, stepped forward without being asked. "I'll witness," he said quietly. Another officer joined. The forms were sealed. Official, irreversible. My father's shoulders dropped fully now. "You're erasing us," he said. "I'm removing access," I corrected. "There's a difference." My mother tried once more. "Please," she said, voice hollow now. "Talk to whoever is in charge. She'll lose everything." I looked toward the doors where Cynthia had been escorted out. "She chose everything," I said, "including this." The room felt colder than it had earlier. Not because of emotion, because illusion had left. My father's voice dropped to almost nothing. "What happens now? You hire a lawyer," I replied. "You cooperate. And you stop using the word family like it's immunity." He flinched. My phone vibrated lightly in my pocket. Time. The pilots were waiting. I gathered the signed documents and handed them to the legal officer present. "Process immediately," I said. "Yes, ma'am." My mother was still kneeling. My father stood beside her, not touching her, not touching me. The banner behind the podium still read, "Honoring Colonel Raymond Carter." It felt outdated now. I picked up my bag. My father spoke one last time. "Elena," he said. Voice stripped of command. "Is this really necessary?" I looked at him steadily. "Yes." Then I walked toward the exit. No one tried to stop me, because sometimes karma doesn't arrive loud. It arrives documented. And once it's signed, there's no appeal. I walked out of the officers' club without looking back. The night air hit differently after a room like that. Cooler, cleaner, honest. On the lawn beyond the parking lot, the helicopter sat with its rotors idling. Navigation lights blinking steady against the dark sky. Crew chief standing by the open door. Operational. On time. No drama. Behind me, the doors opened again. Voices spilled out. Cynthia, angry at first, then desperate. I didn't turn around, but I heard the change in tone. The sharp edge gone, replaced with panic. Metal restraints make a specific sound when they shift against each other. Controlled, mechanical, final. The MPs guided her down the steps. Her heels weren't steady anymore. For years she had walked into rooms believing they belonged to her. Tonight she was being escorted out of one she had just claimed. My father stepped outside too, not running, not shouting, just standing there like a man who realized reputation can evaporate faster than applause. 30 years of service, 30 years of careful alliances, and one investigation was enough to put an asterisk next to his name forever. Not because he stole, because he allowed it, because he signed off on statements he didn't verify, because he believed influence protected blood. My mother followed him, mascara streaked, no script left to perform. They didn't call my name this time. They didn't ask me to fix anything. They finally understood something. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. I was the line they crossed. The crew chief gave me a nod. "Ready, ma'am." I adjusted the strap on my bag and walked the last stretch across the grass. The sound of the rotors drowned out whatever Cynthia was saying behind me. Probably accusations, probably bargaining. It didn't matter. I climbed into the helicopter and secured my headset. As we lifted off, I caught one last glimpse of the officers' club below. Small, ordinary, just a building again. Not a stage, not a throne, just brick and lights. I reached down and touched the silver ring on my finger. My grandfather never talked much about medals. He talked about responsibility, about flying clean, about never confusing ego with mission. He once told me something simple: peace costs more than pride. Choose wisely. Tonight I finally understood the full price. We landed at the airfield within minutes. The F-22s were already staged under floodlights, sharp silhouettes against the dark runway. Ground crew moved with practiced precision. No one here cared about promotion parties. They cared about readiness. I stepped out of the helicopter and walked toward my aircraft. One of the pilots from earlier approached. Airspace window confirmed, he said. Weather stable. Copy, I replied. He didn't congratulate me. He didn't ask questions. He just moved back to position. I climbed the ladder and settled into the cockpit. Straps secure, systems check. Oxygen flow steady, familiar, reliable. The canopy lowered smoothly, sealing out the noise of the world below. For a moment, everything was quiet inside the helmet. I thought about the kitchen table, the empty bank account, the forged signature, the laughter at Grey Ridge. All of it felt smaller now, not erased, just resized. The tower cleared us for departure. Ghost 1, you are cleared for takeoff. I throttled forward. The jet surged down the runway with controlled force, speed building, pressure steady, then lift. The ground dropped away. The city lights spread beneath me in neat grids and glowing clusters. Somewhere down there, my parents were beginning to understand consequences. Somewhere down there, Cynthia was learning that influence doesn't outrank evidence. Up here, there was no noise except mission. No politics, no manipulation, just altitude. At cruising height, the formation locked in around me. 3 F-22s holding position. Steady, professional, earned. I looked down once more at the shrinking outline of the city. For years, I thought silence was survival. Tonight, I realized silence can also be strategy. Peace is the most expensive thing I've ever owned, and it's worth every cent. Before I switch frequencies, let me ask you something. If you've ever been dismissed by your own family because you chose a quieter path, if you've ever been underestimated because you didn't advertise your strength, would you have walked away like I did? Or would you have tried to save them again? Tell me in the comments. And if stories about justice, resilience, and choosing integrity over approval mean something to you, make sure you're subscribed. After the jet leveled out and the city lights faded behind me, I stopped thinking about exposure and started thinking about responsibility. Not theirs, mine. Here's something no one tells you when you grow up in a military family, or a close family, or any family that uses loyalty like currency. Boundaries feel like betrayal the first time you enforce them. I didn't wake up one day wanting distance from my parents. I didn't train my entire career thinking I would remove their access to my records or redirect inheritance away from blood. But here's the truth I had to accept. When someone repeatedly proves they see you as leverage instead of as a person, proximity becomes a liability, and liability in my line of work gets contained. Let's break this down clearly. My parents didn't just make a mistake, they created a pattern. First, it was financial access. My savings weren't borrowed. They were redirected without consent. Then it was narrative control. Statements about my mental stability weren't concern, they were positioning. Then it was coercion, public pressure to sign property over for unity. None of that is family conflict. That's exploitation wrapped in tradition. A lot of people watching this are probably thinking, but they're your parents. Exactly. And that's why it worked for so long. When manipulation comes from strangers, you call it manipulation. When it comes from family, you call it misunderstanding. That delay in naming the behavior is what gives it power. I want to say something very clearly. Boundaries are not revenge. Boundaries are risk management. In the military, we assess threat vectors. We don't do it emotionally. We don't take it personally. We evaluate behavior and access. If an access point keeps getting compromised, you don't argue with it. You restrict it. I didn't cut my parents off because I hated them. I cut their access because they demonstrated they would use it against me. That's not cruelty, that's accountability. Let me give you something practical. If you suspect you're being treated like a resource instead of a person, look for these 3 signs, son. Your value increases only when you provide something. 2. Your boundaries are labeled as selfish. 3. Your success is tolerated only when it benefits them. That was my pattern. When I was quiet, I was tolerated. When I was useful, I was praised. When I asserted independence, I was unstable. That's not love, that's conditional access. And conditional love always has a bill attached. Here's the mistake many strong people make. We think endurance is strength. We think if we can just absorb the behavior long enough, it will change. It won't. Patterns don't respond to patience. They respond to consequences. When I removed my parents from my military access file, I wasn't making a statement. I was closing a vulnerability. When I moved the ranch into a veteran's trust, I wasn't punishing them. I was eliminating leverage. And that's a key distinction. If someone in your life consistently weaponizes your kindness, the solution is not to become colder. It's to become clearer. Clarity sounds like this. You do not get financial access. You do not get emotional control. You do not get to define my reputation. No yelling, no speeches, just policy. I've learned that the healthiest boundaries are boring. They don't require explanation beyond once. They don't beg for understanding. They don't negotiate after being crossed. They simply exist. And here's the uncomfortable part. The moment you enforce them, the people who benefited from your lack of them will call you selfish. They will say you've changed. They will say success made you arrogant. They will say family should override everything. It doesn't. Shared DNA is not a lifetime permission slip. You can love someone and still restrict their access to your life. You can wish them well and still refuse to be used. You can feel empathy and still sign the document. I didn't feel rage when I walked out of that building. I felt alignment. For the first time, my external decisions matched my internal standards. That's peace. And peace costs something. It cost me the illusion that if I performed well enough, I'd eventually earn unconditional respect at home. It cost me the comfort of pretending that what was happening was just how families are. But what I gained was worth more. I gained control over who gets to shape my narrative. I gained financial independence from manipulation. I gained emotional distance from chaos. If you're watching this and you're in a situation where you feel obligated to tolerate behavior because that's just family, ask yourself one question. If this person were not related to me, would I allow this? If the answer is no, then blood is the only thing holding that structure together. And blood is not enough. Let me leave you with something practical you can apply immediately. Step 1. Audit your access points. Who has access to your money, your information, your passwords, your reputation? Step 2. Separate emotion from systems. Change the password before you start the argument. Step 3. Enforce once. Do not explain your boundary 10 times. State it once, repeat it once if necessary. Then operate accordingly. You do not owe unlimited access to anyone who has demonstrated misuse. Not your sibling, not your parent, not your partner. Peace is not loud, it's not dramatic. It's not a mic drop moment in a crowded room. It's the quiet confidence of knowing that no one can pull the rug out from under you anymore. That's what I walked away with that night. Not revenge, not triumph, structure. And structure is what keeps you steady when everything else collapses. If you've ever had to choose between protecting your peace and protecting someone else's ego, I want you to think about which one actually keeps you safe. Because in the end, boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. And the right filters don't block love, they block damage. After everything settled, after the headlines quieted and the formal statements were filed, I kept replaying one moment in my head. Cynthia standing in the center of the room, smiling like she owned it. She truly believed she did. That's what fascinates me now. Not her greed, not even the fraud, the illusion. Cynthia didn't think she was cutting corners. She thought she was playing the game better than everyone else. That's the danger of confusing influence with power. Influence is borrowed. Power is earned. Borrowed things always come with due dates. Cynthia had access. Access to senior officers. Access to administrative systems. Access to discretionary budgets. She mistook that access for authority. She mistook proximity for protection, and she mistook presentation for performance. Let me break something down clearly. Image scales fast, competence scales slow. Image gets applause. Competence gets clearance. If you build your career on being seen, you become dependent on being seen. If you build your career on results, you can operate whether anyone is watching or not. Cynthia needed the room. I needed the mission. That difference doesn't show up immediately. In fact, in the short term, image usually wins. People who network aggressively, speak confidently, and align themselves with power structures often move faster early on. They get promotions. They get recognition. They get validation. But here's the problem. Image collapses under audit. Performance survives it. The night the MPS walked in, no one asked Cynthia how charismatic she was. No one asked how many dinners she hosted. No one asked who she knew. They asked for documentation. And documentation doesn't care about ego. This is something I want you to really think about. If everything you've built were projected onto a screen in front of the people you respect most, would you be calm? That's the audit rule. I operate under that standard daily. Every mission report, every expense, every decision, I assume it could be reviewed by someone above me, because eventually everything is reviewed. The reason I wasn't shaken that night wasn't because I'm fearless. It's because my foundation wasn't cosmetic. Cynthia invested in optics. I invested in skill. She curated perception. I trained execution. You can't Photoshop competence. You can't network your way through physics. When you're in a cockpit at Mach speed, your resume doesn't matter. Your reflexes do. Your discipline does. Your preparation does. That's real power. Here's another uncomfortable truth. People who rely heavily on influence often feel threatened by quiet competence. Why? Because quiet competence doesn't need their approval. And when you don't need approval, you can't be controlled. Look at what Cynthia did. The moment she felt her position questioned, she didn't compete through merit. She tried to undermine through narrative. She labeled me unstable. She tried to redirect perception. That's a classic move. If you can't outperform someone, discredit them. If you can't match their results, question their character. It's cheaper than improvement, but it's also temporary. If you've ever been in a workplace where someone spreads rumors instead of producing results, you've seen this. If you've ever had a sibling minimize your achievements because they feel overshadowed, you've seen this. If you've ever watched someone build status on connections instead of competence, you've seen this. The illusion works until it doesn't, and when it doesn't, the fall is fast. Here's the part that matters to you. If you're the quiet one, if you're the person who doesn't dominate meetings but delivers outcomes, if you're the one who doesn't advertise every win, you might feel overlooked. You might feel like image-driven people are advancing faster. They might be, for now. But advancement built on optics requires constant maintenance. Advancement built on execution becomes self-sustaining. I never chased visibility. Visibility found me when accountability showed up. And accountability always shows up. Maybe not on your timeline, but it arrives. That's why I tell people this. Don't optimize for applause. Optimize for audit. Don't build something that looks impressive. Build something that holds up under scrutiny. Cynthia's mistake wasn't ambition. Ambition is fine. Her mistake was believing the system wouldn't eventually examine her. She assumed loyalty from others would override compliance standards. It doesn't. Systems are slow, but they are thorough. And when they move with evidence. Another lesson here is about control. People who center their identity around influence often need constant reinforcement. They need rooms, they need validation, they need reminders that they matter. That's exhausting. Real power is quieter. It doesn't panic when unrecognized. It doesn't collapse when spotlight shifts. It doesn't need to discredit others to feel secure. If you're building your life right now, ask yourself, am I investing more in how I look or in what I can actually do? Am I trying to be associated with powerful people, or am I trying to become powerful through competence? There's a difference. One strategy is fragile, the other compounds. When the audit came, I didn't have to defend myself. I didn't have to argue. My record did the talking. That's freedom. You can't threaten someone whose foundation is real. You can't destabilize someone whose value isn't performative. The irony is this: Cynthia chased power. I chased mastery. She needed witnesses. I needed readiness. In the end, only one of those survives exposure. If you take anything from this part of my story, take this: build something that doesn't crumble when the room turns silent. Because eventually the music stops. And when it does, all that remains is what you actually built. After everything that happened, people kept asking me the same question: was it worth it? They weren't asking about the investigation. They weren't asking about the inheritance. They were asking about the distance, the silence, the separation. Here's the honest answer. Yes. But peace is expensive, and most people don't want to pay full price. We like the idea of peace. We just don't like what it costs. Peace cost me access to a version of family that looked respectable from the outside. It cost me the illusion that one day they would wake up and suddenly understand me. It cost me being able to walk into a room and pretend everything was fine. But here's what it gave me: sleep, clarity, control. That's a trade I'll make every time. A lot of people confuse peace with winning. Peace isn't about defeating someone. It's about no longer needing to. When I flew out that night, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I wasn't replaying Cynthia's arrest. I wasn't imagining apologies. I was thinking about alignment. For years, I lived in two realities. One where I was competent, disciplined, trusted with classified responsibility, and another where I was treated like an afterthought. That split wears on you. You start to question yourself. You start to wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe you are too quiet. Maybe you are too distant. Maybe you should try harder to fit. Peace begins when you stop trying to reconcile who you are with who they need you to be. Let me give you something practical. If you're stuck in a dynamic where you're constantly minimizing yourself to keep others comfortable, ask yourself 4 questions. First, am I staying because I love them or because I'm afraid of being labeled the bad one? Second, if they weren't related to me, would I tolerate this behavior? Third, does this relationship require me to shrink in order to survive? Fourth, if nothing changed for the next 5 years, would I still be okay with this? Those questions aren't dramatic, they're diagnostic. And diagnostics tell you where the fracture is. Another truth no one likes to say out loud: some relationships only function when you are weaker. The moment you grow, the system destabilizes. Not because growth is wrong, because the structure was built on imbalance. When I stopped playing small, my family didn't celebrate. They escalated. That told me everything I needed to know. Here's something else. Freedom is not loud. It doesn't look like a victory speech. It looks like not checking your phone with anxiety. It looks like not rehearsing conversations in your head before family gatherings. It looks like not bracing yourself for criticism disguised as advice. Freedom is quiet. It's the absence of constant tension. And that quiet is earned. You earn it by making decisions that protect your long-term stability over short-term approval. You earn it by choosing integrity over image. You earn it by refusing to trade your self-respect for temporary peace. Because temporary peace is just delayed conflict. Real peace sometimes requires immediate discomfort. There were people who told me I should have handled it privately, that I should have protected my father's reputation, that I should have worked it out. Let me say this clearly: you cannot privately fix a public pattern of abuse. And you cannot protect someone's image at the expense of your own safety. That's not loyalty, that's self-erasure. Peace requires courage. Not the loud kind, the steady kind. The kind that signs documents even when your hands are steady but your heart is heavy. The kind that walks away without making a scene. The kind that chooses long-term clarity over short-term reconciliation. If you're in a situation where you feel trapped between being respected and being accepted, understand something important. Respect builds stability. Acceptance without respect builds dependency. I would rather be respected at a distance than accepted under control. That's the difference. Peace also requires preparation, financial independence, emotional regulation, skill development. If you are dependent on the people who mistreat you, leaving becomes theoretical. That's why I always tell people this. Build quietly, save privately, train consistently, develop skills no one can take from you. When the moment comes to choose yourself, you want options. Options create peace. Dependence creates fear. I didn't wake up fearless. I built myself into a position where fear had less leverage. That's a key distinction. You don't eliminate fear. You reduce its power over your decisions. And here's the final piece. You cannot heal in the same environment that taught you to doubt yourself. Distance is not cruelty. Distance is perspective. When I look back now, I don't feel rage. I don't even feel vindicated. I feel calm, and calm is expensive. It's purchased through hard conversations, through uncomfortable boundaries, through letting people misunderstand you, through allowing your reputation to temporarily shift while the truth stabilizes. But once you own it, no one can invoice you again. So if you've been underestimated, if you've been dismissed, if you've been told to stay small to keep the peace, ask yourself this: whose peace are you protecting and what is it costing you? Because at the end of the day, peace is not given, it is built. And once you build it correctly, no one else gets to control the terms.
Final note: This story is a work of fiction created by artificial intelligence to heighten drama and emotion. But the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.